This fall and winter, the Dutch-based hotelier citizenM will double its presence in the United States when it opens 5 new properties in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Miami. Since 2008, citizenM has been one of the industry's avid proponents of modular construction that shaves several months off the process. And to discuss the advantages and challenges of modular construction is Menno Hilberts, citizenM's Managing Director of Project Management. Welcome, Menno.
Hey, good morning, John. Thanks for having me on this.
Great. Since your company built its first modular hotel in Amsterdam in 2008, how many hotels worldwide have you built using modular construction?
So we did 9 to date, 2 in Amsterdam, 4 in the UK, 3 in the US. So that's almost half of our rollout so far is modular.
Mm-hmm. Does your company doesn't always build modular? What are your criteria for choosing that process?
Interesting question. If it was up to me, our criteria would be the default would be modular. But I would say that the criteria are a bit soft. You need to find the right mix of a city that's open to modular, a contractor, design team, our internal project management staff. It all needs to work together as a team because modular is different. It's not like you flip a switch and all of a sudden everybody knows what to do. No, it's relearning and unlearning a lot of what construction people know. And if that mix isn't there, you set yourself up for failure. So it needs to be well thought of process basically. And that I think in the US probably we'll do 30-40%. And as we get more experience with contractors, that'll grow.
Mm-hmm. Where is your company sourcing its modules, and can you give me a time frame on average of how long it takes from placing an order to job site delivery?
Yeah, so we've had quite the challenge, honestly, finding high quality, because what high quality modular suppliers. We do a lot of our projects are urban high rises, so you need steel boxes, and there are really only a handful of people that do this. Unfortunately, nobody in the US so far has been able to pull that off. So we worked with a couple of companies in the UK. Actually started off with almost our own company in the beginning. The last projects we did were with Polcom out of Poland and CN of China. So those are the 2 most mature companies I would say out there at this point. But I'm really looking for somebody in the US that's really
yeah. I hear that if you were just shipping domestically, it would cost you $10 a mile per module, at least on the residential side, and so the transportation component is very expensive.
It depends a little bit. I think if you develop the product so that it's intermodal, so it can be both on a container ship and transported by train, you're probably in a better place. Honestly, transportation cost has never been the factor that's been crucial. It's just finding a manufacturer that's able to produce these is the hardest part. So.
In the best of all possible worlds, how long does it take to go from order to job site delivery?
Yeah, so that's completely different from what's normal in the construction industry. You start with, there's a clear template for how construction projects work. Now, if you want to do modular, you need to rip that up and start afresh, because the first thing you need to do is place an order for the modules, not start on site, not dig your foundation and whatnot. But that pre-con is probably something a lot of people underestimate. You have to compare it much more to producing a car than building a building. So you'd have to put a lot of pre-con and engineering and do CA work while you're designing the rest of the building. So that front loads the effort quite a bit. I would say from placing an order to actually producing modules, you should probably count on a year. I'd love to say that you can do it faster, but that's where it probably shakes out to be a year.
I noticed that Mortensen is your general contractor on the Los Angeles project that's opening up in September. Are you
Yep.
finding that the GCs in general are becoming more receptive to this type of construction?
I don't know, it varies. I would say most GCs have no idea.
Mm.
Honestly, they have not got a strategic plan to drive modular developments into the future or whatnot. They just look at projects and see where they can get work. Morrison was really different. They interviewed us basically and
Oh,
said,
really?
"Hey, we're interested in exploring this with you, but it has to be multiple projects and it has to be a real partnership." So they were in it for the, let's say, the strategic long-term view, and for them, modular is a key component of the future of construction. So they used to have this tagline, "Building what's next," and that was definitely one of the things that they wanted to explore and become better at. So now they've got two under their belt, and the third one lined up. So we're getting into a real rhythm. But yeah, it's worked
Mhm.
really great so far.
This
Yeah.
is more of a question for a general contractor than it might be for your company, but I'll ask it anyhow. And how does modular impact the job site in terms of scheduling, in terms of manpower, and
Yeah.
how has it changed what would be normally conventional construction?
Yeah, that really is a great question because modular, you're almost splitting the project up in two significantly different projects.
Hmm.
You've got modular manufacturing, which is almost entirely decoupled from the site construction. So most of our buildings are best compared to a table with Lego blocks on top in layman's terms. So you build your foundation and your structure to the podium deck. That's all built on site, and the modules are stacked as Lego blocks on top. Now, the sequence is so out of whack that by the time you're pouring your foundation, you're also punch listing rooms in a facility. So your contractor really needs to be able to manage that sort of hybrid schedule where you're doing finishes while you're pouring concrete, and it requires almost different teams and a different mindset. So as I said, you need to rip up the manual of how to build buildings and relearn that. Um, it's interesting, but the successful modular projects that I've done always had this acknowledgement of the whole team of this hybrid structure where you really, rather than doing things sequentially, as is the norm in construction, do task consecutively or yeah, simultaneously.
Mm.
Sorry. Uh,
Menno, how accurate is the criticisms of modular that you can't do customization, that it limits you in terms of design? Are those criticisms still valid?
I think they are, and that maybe. I mean, you can almost build anything out of volumetric modular blocks if you wanted to, but it really doesn't make any sense. So
Hmm.
back to the Lego analogy, once you say, hey, I want round blocks or weird shaped blocks, it really doesn't make much sense anymore. As soon as you start deviating too much from anything you can put on a container ship or on a truck, you set yourself up for failure. I
Hmm.
think that the future success of modular depends on standardizing the product.
Yeah.
I think that would be so. I think the mistake a lot of people make in this is they stick to a traditional design and try to do that modular. Whereas if you take a step back and say, how can I tweak the design so that it actually fits within, let's say, something that looks like a container, a box, or a Lego block, whatever you want to call it, a module, then you set yourself up for success. But if you try to build that one-off prototype um, in a modular fashion, it's probably not going to work.
Somebody else mentioned to me when you're talking about a modular job, he says the project needs to be factory ready, as opposed to the reverse being the case. So
Yeah,
what you mentioned earlier about pre-con being really seminal to the success of a lot of these projects in terms of being able to get the design and the value engineering as upfront as possible.
Yeah, I think it's crucial that you've got these three parties, the owner, the contractor, and the design team in alignment. So they figured out how modular fits into your project. If, again, if one of those parameters, and I will bring the city or the state, the HJ into the equation, if one of those four parameters isn't working, it's going to be an uphill battle. And that's something you want to avoid.
Yeah. What are some of the other challenges to modular? When you're thinking of, you mentioned earlier that the city has to be receptive to it, but are there other things that factor in before you pull the trigger on a project like this?
Well, obviously, I mean, we've had some issues with unions not particularly liking that idea of they see it as a threat to, in some cities that is, as a threat to their control of the city or work being taken uh, out of that city. I don't think it actually is. I think in most of those cities, we're struggling with the shortage of labor as it is.
Yes.
And if we work together quite well, we can work together quite well. And actually, we're not reducing the on-site scope of a lot of trades significantly. So, but that's been the other factor that we have to consider. So cities, and that can be a real struggle if one of the inspectors or plan reviewers really does not like the idea of modular or the responsibility of signing. We had this a little bit in LA where there was reluctance to sign the first modular high rise in the city. It took a while for us to work with the city and the state to satisfy them and make them comfortable with the process. So you have to make sure that those boxes are checked and people are open to it.
Mhm. As your company expands in North America, it sounds like modular is going to play a increasingly important role in your growth. But what kind of red flags are you keeping an eye on that might impede that growth?
Well, the biggest risk I see is, and I think I started with that, is the availability of modular suppliers.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to start this, I think, has got a bright future ahead of them. Call me. I have free advice, tons of it. No, honestly, I think there's a great opportunity, but it's a new challenging business. But that for us is by far the biggest risk. Is yeah,
To that point, I've heard numbers that a modular factory can cost up to $50 million. Have you found that is it your observation that the investment community is on board on this? I mean, do they have enough patient capital to wait 5 or 6 years for a modular factory to make money?
I'm going to throw you a curveball. I think the investment in Katera has proven that there is appetite to explore innovation in the construction industry. Because let's face it, as a bunch we're pretty archaic in the way we do things.
That's a
So
kind way of putting it.
right, there's definitely huge potential for people that can crack that nut. But as the same example as Katera shows, it's also risky business in an industry that's really conservative. So not sure if that's a good answer, but I
No,
think there is.
well, I mean, the Procore went public. I mean, Katera was able to raise $1.8 billion. I
Yeah,
mean, regardless of what happened to the company, that does tell you that people are interested in getting into this. Yeah.
yeah. And I think there's a bright future for innovation in the construction industry. But we have to, as an industry, be open to that, embrace it, support it, and build a track record of successful projects. And I hope more people are going to jump on that bandwagon because modular owners, architects, manufacturers, contractors, they're few and far between.
Mm. Does your company get any marketing bang out of your advocacy of modular? I mean, is it something that you can tout, or does it draw customers?
Not really. So I'd love to say, yes, it's great. And it does help a little bit on the sustainability front, but
Hmm.
most of the advantages of modular construction are, let's say, under the hood. So it's really beneficial for us because we want to do not just one project or two projects, we want to do a rollout. And then it really pays off to invest upfront, optimize this whole process, and then roll out multiple projects across the US. If you do just one project, it doesn't make any sense. If you have this one prototype in one building you want to build anywhere, don't even consider it. Don't spend any time. It's not going to be cheaper, better, or whatever. It's just going to be more heartache and risk. But if you do multiples that look alike, sure, now then it's time to wake up and invest in this. But on the customer side, and we are a hotel company, ultimately you wouldn't know the difference between a modular built hotel and a traditional hotel. You wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, that's
And we
probably a
don't.
good thing.
It is a good thing. It has this connotation sometimes of being cheap, and it isn't. I mean, if you look at what we pulled off in LA, it is, yeah, it's a great hotel. You walk in and you would, as I said, you wouldn't know that it's built modular. If I tell people like, whoa, really? All these were sort of stacked, modified shipping containers. A few people understand it and believe it. So,
Menno, thanks for taking a couple of minutes to speak with us about this. I wish you good luck with the rollout.
thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And this is
Bye.
John Caulfield from Build Design and Construction. Thanks for joining us as well.